The western sun blazed down like fire as Kahara, a large and muscular Apache woman, lay motionless on the scorching sand. She had once led countless raids, but after her final battle with the cavalry, her legs had been left paralyzed, and now that her strength was no longer whole, the tribe saw her as a burden. Her father placed a pouch of dried meat on the ground. Her two brothers stood behind him, their eyes as cold as stone. None of them looked directly into Kahara's eyes, which burned with fury and resentment. "Father," she rasped, "do not leave me here." He did not answer. He simply turned his back and said to his sons, "Let's go." Dust rose as the three figures slowly disappeared toward the horizon, leaving behind Kahara, the warrior who was once their pride. Beneath the searing heat that made the air shimmer like it was about to catch fire, she tried to drag her massive frame off the ground, but her numb legs betrayed her, sending her crashing back down. Sweat mixed with sand and stung her eyes. People from the nearby town passed by a few times. Someone muttered, "That giant Apache girl, stay away," and then they all walked on, as if helping a paralyzed person was a curse waiting to happen. When the sun had tilted westward, a hay cart came to a stop. A man in rough fabric clothing, his arms sun-darkened, stepped down. Thomas Rourke, a reclusive farmer who lived on the edge of town. Kahara gasped, "Aren't you afraid of me?" Thomas knelt down and gently lifted her shoulders, as if lifting a heavy log. "You need help. That is enough." Without another word, he began building a makeshift stretcher from the wooden planks on his cart, then pulled Kahara away from the place where even her own tribe had abandoned her. Thomas Rourke's farm sat more than a mile from town, marked only by a sagging wooden fence, a small horse stable, and a house with a sun-faded roof. By the time he pulled the stretcher into the yard, Thomas was breathing heavily from exhaustion, yet he still lifted Kahara gently, as if afraid to cause her more pain. The large Apache woman lay on a crude bed Thomas had covered with an old blanket. The air carried the scent of pine wood, sawdust, and smoke from the hearth. Kahara looked around, her dark eyes as deep as the desert night, uneasy, yet silent. "You brought me to your home?" she asked. Thomas only nodded, removing his cracked gloves. There was nowhere else. "Here. You are safer than out there." Kahara wanted to laugh, but her throat was dry. An Apache warrior who once led a squad into battle, now lying like a discarded log. Her paralyzed legs made her pride feel as if it had been shattered all over again. A while later, Thomas brought a bowl of hot porridge and placed it on the table. "Eat," he said. Kahara tried to raise her hand. Her arm solid and muscular, as thick as a man's forearm, still held strength. But it trembled. The spoon clattered to the floor. She clenched her jaw, her breath sharp and angry. "I am this big, and I cannot even feed myself. How pathetic." Her voice was low and tight, laced with bitterness. Thomas bent down, picked up the spoon, placed it back in her hand, then gently shook his head. Surviving has never been something to be ashamed of. Kahara lowered her gaze for the first time, feeling like someone was looking at her not with fear, pity, or contempt. Just simply seeing her as a person. She still could not feed herself. Thomas let out a soft breath, then turned his back to her, holding the spoon behind his shoulder so she could lean forward and eat, preserving both her pride and her strength. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Thomas replied, his voice calm, like stating a simple fact. "I am used to doing things alone. Helping one more person is not hard." Through the small window, townspeople kept glancing nervously toward the farm. A woman whispered to the person beside her, "Look at that. Thomas brought a giant Apache warrior into his home. He's asking for trouble." Thomas heard them, but he did not bother to turn around. Night fell. Kahara lay on the bed, listening to the sound of Thomas stoking the fire, the soft rhythm of a knife on wood, the scrape of planks as he reinforced the door. Each sound carried a strange weight, like someone was quietly putting back together the pieces of her broken life. For the first time in days, Kahara slept without the fear of being left behind again. The next morning, when Kahara woke up, the scent of fresh wood and the steady rhythm of hammering echoed from outside. She turned her body, her legs heavy like slabs of stone, and struggled to push herself up enough to glance through the window. Thomas Rourke was hunched over a pile of old wheels, Thick wooden frames and rusted metal bars spread around him. She frowned. "What are you doing?" Thomas did not look up, continuing to saw through planks as if it were second nature. "Something that needs doing," he said. Kahara bit her lip. The man spoke so little, it irritated her. Yet in every strike of the hammer, she felt a kind of patience she had rarely seen, a kind of patience the battlefield never allowed. By noon, Thomas carried a large wooden board into the room. Kahara looked at it closely, and her heart tightened just a little. It was the frame of a wheelchair twice the size of a normal one, big enough to support her muscular, heavy body. "For me?" Kahara asked, her voice catching slightly. Thomas wiped the sweat from his brow, speaking as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Who else would it be for? In the days that followed, the sound of hammering and sawing filled the air. Kahara sat on the bed watching, her strong hands resting on her knees, caught in a strange space between gratitude and discomfort. On the battlefield, she had always been the strongest one. Now, a skinny farmer was building her something her own tribe had never even considered. One evening, as Thomas tightened a bolt on the wheel axle, Kahara spoke softly. "I used to have many comrades, but when my legs were gone, they left me." She looked down at her hands, large, strong fingers marked with scars. "Aren't you afraid that helping someone like me will bring you trouble?" Thomas paused, then looked at her through the warm glow of the lamp. "Of course I am, but letting you die out there, that scared me more." The day the wheelchair was finished, the desert wind swept through, carrying with it the smell of hay and blazing sun. Thomas lifted Kahara, her body heavy, but he did not complain once. He set her gently onto the chair and gave the wheel a spin. "Solid," he said. "Give it a try." Kahara placed her hands on the rims and gave a gentle push. The wheelchair rolled smoothly across the wooden floor. Her heart pounded like a war drum. "You really gave me freedom," she whispered. Thomas stood nearby, one hand resting on the doorframe, his voice quiet and deep. "You are no longer bound to one place. Wherever you want to go, go." Kahara turned to him, her eyes shimmering like the light of the setting sun. "Even if I choose to leave this place?" Thomas gave a slow, subtle nod. "If that is what you want." Kahara shook her head, her voice firm. "No, I do not want that." Ever since the day that massive wheelchair became hers, Kahara started taking part in the work around the farm. Her muscular hands gripped the hammer as if they had known its weight since childhood. Even though her motionless legs remained still beneath the blanket, Thomas said nothing. He simply let her do whatever she wanted. In the mornings, Kahara sat in her wheelchair, holding the wooden board steady while Thomas sawed. In the afternoons, she carried buckets of water with her powerful arms, every muscle defined and taut. At night, the two of them repaired the rotting door of the horse stable. They worked like people who had known each other for years without needing many words. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the red hills and a fiery orange glow lit up Kahara's sharp features, she wheeled herself out onto the porch, stopping beside Thomas, who was shaving down a long plank of wood. "You let me do all this," Kahara said, "as if I am still a warrior." Thomas did not stop his work. "I do not care what you used to be. You are working now, that is enough." Kahara let out a quiet laugh. One of the rare ones, since her legs had gone numb. The desert wind ran through her black hair, carrying the scent of dry grass and sawdust from Thomas's shirt. After a while, Kahara looked down at her hands, large, strong, scarred. Her voice dropped, unusually hesitant for an Apache warrior. "Thomas, I have never been close to a man before. I am curious, and I long to know what that feels like." Thomas froze. The piece of wood slipped gently from his hand onto the floor. He turned to her. His gaze was not filled with desire, but with deep respect. "Kahara," he said slowly, "I will never do anything to make you uncomfortable, but I will not pretend that I feel nothing." Kahara blushed. A hardened warrior like her. Yet a calm, sincere answer was enough to make her avoid his gaze. Her broad shoulders drew in slightly, as if she were shy for the very first time. Thomas continued, his voice as gentle as the night breeze. "There is nothing wrong with longing, but it must come with readiness and trust." Kahara took a deep breath. The fierce look that once defined her now softened in a way even she did not expect. I do not know if I am ready, she whispered. But I am not afraid when I am with you. That night, they sat in silence for a long time on the wooden porch. Only the sounds of insects and the wind filled the space. But the silence was not distant. It was warm, full, and touched something deep within two people who had both once been abandoned. Neither of them said another word. But somehow, the small distance between them had quietly disappeared. Thank you for being here. If this story reminded you of old days, dusty afternoons, and the sound of hooves echoing in your heart, consider subscribing to my channel, so that each day we can sit together again. And I will tell you another tale from the West. After that night full of confessions, something shifted between Thomas and Kahara. It was not tense, and it was not rushed. It was simply warmer, closer, and so strange that both of them felt it deep within. In the days that followed, Kahara helped Thomas rebuild the fence. Her muscular arms lifted heavy wooden posts like they weighed nothing. Thomas stood nearby, watching with a mix of admiration and a heart that beat faster than usual. Every evening, they shared dinner at the wooden table they had repaired together. Whatever Thomas cooked, Kahara ate even when the porridge was too thin or the meat slightly burnt. She told stories from the battlefield. Thomas shared memories of growing up without parents, working the land alone since he was 15. In those quiet stories, they found each other. One night, the desert wind drifted softly across the land, and the moon hung in the sky like a smooth-cut piece of white wood. Thomas stepped out onto the porch, where Kahara sat in her wheelchair, her eyes gazing far out toward the darkening horizon. Moonlight slid across her broad shoulders and powerful frame, casting a figure that looked both strong and achingly alone. Thomas knew if he did not speak tonight, he might never have the courage again. He stepped forward and knelt before her. Kahara startled. "Thomas, what are you doing?" Thomas clasped his hands tightly, his voice slightly trembling, but steady. "I do not have a ring. There is no preacher here. I have nothing but this land, these hands, and my promise." Kahara's eyes widened, her heart so used to war now pounding like a ceremonial drum. Thomas went on, "Kahara, I want to marry you, if you will have me as your husband. Whether your legs ever walk again, or not. No matter how heavy your past may be." Kahara slowly brought a hand to her mouth. She, a giant Apache warrior, once unshaken by bullets, now found her eyes stinging from something much more powerful. "Thomas," she whispered, "no one has ever chosen me. No one has ever looked at me like someone worthy of love." Thomas looked up, his eyes steady. "I chose you, from the very first day I met you." Kahara took a deep breath. Her strong shoulders trembled just a little. Finally, she placed her large hand on his shoulder, her voice low, but filled with warmth. "I say yes. You are everything I have wanted, for a very long time." Thomas slowly leaned in toward her, and they began to share a kiss, fierce, honest, and full of the fire they had kept hidden. That night, under the desert wind and the soft creak of old wood, two souls once abandoned found their way to each other. They did not need silver rings. All they needed was a true heart. Rumors about the giant Apache woman living with a white farmer spread faster than the desert wind, and like everything in the West, rumors always find their way back to where they belong. One afternoon, as the sky burned a deep red, Kahara was helping Thomas stack lumber when the thunder of hooves echoed from afar. They both turned. 3 riders approached the farm, Apache men, bare-chested with war paint across their skin. Kahara recognized them immediately. Her father, her 2 brothers, and the hatred on their faces was something she could never forget. Thomas stepped in front of the porch, gripping his wood axe tightly. "Kahara, go inside," he said softly, but she shook her head, her eyes as cold as mountain stone. "No. I need to face them." The 3 Apache dismounted. The elder stepped forward, his voice deep and rough. "Kahara, you ran from the tribe, and now you let a white man into your life?" The eldest brother spat on the ground. "Shame. A warrior like you, dragged around like some broken animal." The younger brother gripped his bow tightly. "You are coming back with us, right now." Thomas held the axe firmer, but Kahara raised a hand gently. "Let me," she said. She rolled her wheelchair forward, her large hands gripping the wheels, her eyes burning like hot embers. "You left me," Kahara said slowly. "Out in the desert, without a word, without a drop of water." Her father answered, "Because you could no longer walk. The tribe does not carry the useless." The words hit Kahara like arrows. She bowed her head briefly, then raised it again, her voice sharp as forged steel. "But here I survived. I built that shelf. I fixed that window. I work. I fight. I live." She raised the wood axe Thomas had given her, her muscular arms tensed, veins standing out beneath her skin. "And if anyone tries to drag me away, I will show them exactly what I am still capable of." The desert wind blew, carrying a heavy silence. Her father looked at the axe, at his daughter's massive hands, then at Thomas standing close, ready to defend her. For the first time, hesitation flickered across his face. He saw not a burden but a strength he had never created. At last, he tilted his chin toward his sons. "Let's go. She has made her choice." The 3 horses galloped off, kicking up a trail of dust behind them. Kahara breathed heavily, not from fear, but because her heart pounded like a war drum. Thomas stepped up and placed a hand on her shoulder. She looked up, her eyes still burned, but they no longer wavered. "They no longer have the right to decide my life," she said. Thomas nodded gently. "That is right. You are here because you choose to be." That evening, Kahara belonged to herself again, and to the one who had chosen her. After the day she stood up to her old family, it felt as if a heavy stone had finally been lifted off Kahara's chest. The next morning, she woke earlier than usual and wheeled herself out into the yard just as the sun was breaking over the desert in a thin line of light. Thomas was checking the new fence. He turned when he heard the sound of wheels on dirt. "You are up early," he said. Kahara shrugged. "Working helps clear the mind." She lifted a wooden post with one hand, muscles standing out beneath her darkened skin. Thomas watched, unable to hide his admiration. Even with paralyzed legs, the strength in her upper body was so powerful that it often made him stop just to look at her. In the midday heat, they worked side by side, watering the cornfield, fixing the roof of the stable, sweeping away fallen wood scraps. Kahara threw herself into the work with such energy that Thomas finally reached out and touched her shoulder gently. "Kahara, take a break. You do not have to prove anything." She looked up, sweat trailing down her temple, her eyes softer than usual. "I am not doing this to prove anything. I am doing it because I belong here." Those words made Thomas pause for a long moment, as if the desert wind had just blown straight into his heart. That afternoon, they ate together under the porch. Kahara looked out over the land, the freshly repaired stable, the new fence, the door with its new coat of paint. Everything bore her mark. She spoke without thinking. "I used to believe I only had value when I held a spear, when I could ride a horse. When my legs gave out, I thought I had lost everything." Thomas rested his arm on the table, his voice as steady as ever. "You still have so much more. Strength, will, and a heart." Kahara let out a quiet laugh. "A heart? A warrior like me? With a heart?" Thomas looked straight at her, eyes unblinking. "You have more heart than anyone I have ever met." As the evening settled in, red sunlight mingling with golden dust, Kahara leaned her head against the doorframe. Her voice was low, but softer than he had ever heard it. "Thomas, when I am with you, I do not feel like someone who was left behind. I feel alive." Thomas stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder gently, as if touching something precious. "You did not fall into my life," he said. "You walked into it with your own strength." Kahara closed her eyes, letting those words sink deep into her heart. This place, the wooden porch, the cornfield, the smell of sawdust, the sound of sawing wood each morning, was no longer just a farm. It was home. And for the first time since the war, Kahara knew she was worthy of love, of staying, and of living a life no one else could define for her. There were no church bells on the wedding day of Thomas and Kahara, no preacher. Just a quiet desert morning, the wind brushing through golden grass, and 2 souls once abandoned, now standing side by side on a wooden porch. Thomas had woken up early. He brought out a small box made of pine wood, its surface still marked by carving tools. When he opened it, Kahara saw a rough, wide silver ring clearly forged to fit her strong, powerful fingers. Her throat tightened. "Thomas, you made this for me?" He nodded gently. "I have wanted to give it to you for a long time. I was just waiting for the right day." Thomas took Kahara's hand, a hand large, scarred, and full of strength from countless battles. He slid the ring on. It fit perfectly, as if it was made for her and no one else. "Kahara," Thomas said, his voice low but steady, "you were not abandoned in this life. You were chosen, and you have earned your place here." Kahara bit her lip. On the battlefield, all those years, she had not shed a single tear. But now, standing in front of this man, the tears came hot and fast. "All my life," she said, "I only knew how to fight, and how it felt to be left behind. But you were never afraid of me. You never turned away. You saw me, Thomas. You saw who I really am." Thomas smiled and gently pressed his forehead to her hand, like a quiet vow spoken without words. "And I will keep seeing you that way, for the rest of my life." The desert wind swept across the porch, lifting strands of Kahara's long black hair. She reached up, touched the silver ring, and for the first time, her broad chest felt light, free from the weight of the past. She spoke softly, but with unwavering certainty. "Two people who were once cast aside have now built a home." After that morning, the little farm began to change. Kahara built a new shed, repaired the stable, and carved every plank of wood with her powerful hands. Thomas expanded the cornfield, planted more hay, taught her how to read the soil, read the sky, and track the seasons. And every evening, when the sun melted behind the red hills, they sat side by side on the wooden porch, watching the last light fade. No war, no abandonment, just warmth, passing quietly from one shoulder to the other. In the harshest, driest land of the West, a family was built not with riches, not with grand words, but with resilience, kindness, and a love that no one believed they deserved, except for themselves. Dear listener, some people never speak grand words, never ask to be noticed. They simply kneel down and lift someone up, just as Thomas did with Kahara. Kindness is not charity. It is the most natural instinct of hearts that can see pain in the eyes of another. In a land full of gunsmoke and selfishness, kindness is rare, like water in the desert. But sometimes, just one person like that is enough to change another person's life forever. Thank you for being here with me, dear audience of Wild West storytelling. Wherever you are listening to this from, I hope peace and happiness always follow you. I love you all. Tell me where you are listening from. Type the number 8 if you enjoyed this story, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. Thank you, dear friends of Wild West storytelling.